Welcome to our next episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. We have a very interesting person here today, a multifaceted person. I know you think that Dr. Kamini Rao will only get a doctor. Yeah, I am partial to doctors, but this doctor is different. He's not only a doctor, yes, you heard me right, he's an agriculturist as well, a floriculturist, and also a person who actually looks into security things and safety for the army. That's not all. He also has a collection of vintage cars. No, I can't tell you anything more because this is going to be very confusing to you. Let's hear from him what all he can do. And that's what Masterclass is about. I'm going to introduce to you today none other than Dr. Ravi Prakash. Dr. Ravi Prakash, I'm so happy to have you today.
Happy
a multifaceted person. So, what made you really take up medicine? Who was behind you for you to take up medicine?
I should say my parents were very keen that I become a doctor, and I was also very keen to be a doctor because way back in my school, Ramakrishna Vidyashala, where I did my high school, I was also the dispensary secretary. And there was Dr. Kinney who was looking after the dispensary, and he always said that I had good hands and a good heart, and he said that you would turn out a good doctor and you should, try and work on you becoming a doctor. I think that is probably the inspiration which sort of went on me, and then a little bit of support from my parents, and I got into medicine. And fortunately, even though I got into various colleges, first I got into BMC, then I got into Belgaum, then I got into Manipal, finally I got into St. John's, where you are also an alumni of St. John's, and I'm very proud that I'm part of St. John's fraternity, and that's how my medical journey
Why did you have to
started.
shift to so many medical colleges? What was the
Initially it was I was about 169th in the rank list. So they first said that I would get the government college, and then later I said, okay, no, I didn't want to be in the government college. Then I got the Belgaum, so I said that's a better city rather than Bangalore. Then I got Manipal. I was tempted. So whenever I got a better college, it all happened in about 4 weeks. I moved all that, and St. John's was the college which gave the interviews only last. That came in last. But finally, when I got into St. John's, then I thought this is where I'm going to stay. And that's where I stayed.
That's good, because what happened is during your time, you were the one that really had the flamboyant car.
I don't know whether that's the right word. The institution itself had a little flamboyant,
That
aura.
I agree, yes.
And initially, yes, I used to borrow my father's car and drive around. Because whenever my dad used to travel to Delhi, he used to leave the car in Bangalore. And my dad's friend, who was a German, who was also a engineer who built and initiated the German press, which is the printing press for the currency notes in Mysore. And he had a Mercedes those days. So whenever he went out of Mysore, he used to leave the car in Bangalore. And I had this, glory of using these cars and putting my collars up and say, I got my uncle's car, I got my dad's car. So that was sort of a borrowed glory that I lived on for some time.
But the thing is, wherever I used to see you, of course you were junior to me, but I always saw that you did have a passion for something exotic and something which was different from what you were actually into. So it was something which was a 360 degrees. Now, you were a doctor, but then you suddenly went into agriculture, horticulture, floriculture, and whatnot. Why this agriculture background?
I would say my paternal side, my grandparents are from Mandya. They are basically from the agriculture background. And every holidays, I used to go and work with my grandparents. And then there was also an initiative, they used to also give me a little bit of a extra, if I work with them and if I go to the fields, they used to give me a little more monies and a little more, this sugar candies, what we call it as made out of jaggery and coconut. So all these were little bonus I used to get from them. And I used to love staying there because I used to love being with the nature, helping them. And then at the end of the day, I used to also earn little pocket money. So that sort of got into me, and then I always sort of got, more into, agriculture, into, that little green fingers sort of tipped off from my paternal side.
But then you decided not to live in the city and you decided to get a beautiful place called Kala Farm. And I remember visiting that place, and it's beautiful with so much of greenery. And this is way back almost 30 years ago. Now, what made you get into the outer city? Now it's almost well inside the city, but at that time it was quite outside the city. How did you manage?
That's a little story. In fact, my grandfather dangled a carrot in front of me, saying that if I get a farm, would you look after? So I quickly agreed and said, yes, I would. So he sadly thought that I would only look after the farm and do the medicine. But he did not ever think that I would get the entire classes of mine with all the girls and boys and have a party on the farm and do also my agriculture. So it was a blend of what my grandfather's interests were, that I continue my agriculture and I do medicine, but I don't get into any extracurricular activities.
I know you're one person that is very passionate about doing everything, and also you wear that passion on you. I can see these vintage cars on you, and there is also a lapel here as well as another lapel. And mind you, even the handkerchief that you stuck into your pocket also has cars. Now you have so much of passion for these vintage cars. In fact, I remember to see even in Deccan Herald and Times of India, where they used to show these cars going on a rally. So where did you get this passion for these old cars?
I started, when I was in my younger days, my grandfather sort of spoiled me at the age of 14. He got me a motorcycle when I just got out of my 10th. And I enjoyed riding motorcycle. And then I had these few friends in Mysore called Somendra Singh, who was also into riding and racing, and he used to tune motorcycles and he's the one who sort of got me into racing and rallying. And I got into serious racing and rallying in my life. And I'm very happy for that little stint that I had from 81 to 84. The 3 long years, I was also the national champion, for 3 consecutive years, and I have 72 victories and 105 placings, podium placings to my credit. And that is how sort of I got into racing and rallying. But being in medicine, I knew that racing and rallying would not go on, and that's where I slowly moved into vintage and classic cars.
Well, even with vintage and classic cars, I think that hobby is pretty expensive. And so even collecting these vintage cars and then trying to make them run and making sure that those spare parts are available, how difficult was it?
It is difficult. Nothing is easy in this life. Everything is difficult. It's the same struggle that one would go through when you get into a hobby or you convert that hobby into passion, and it also becomes an obsession later. It is expensive, it is time consuming. You need to spend a lot of quality time if you want to be somewhere on the top. And fortunately I had friends, I had my family, both my wife and my 2 daughters, my wife Sabina, Rupali and Shifali, my daughters. Everybody has been passionate about the cars. So that sort of encouraged me to further my collections, build up my collections, build my own garage and have my own team who can restore these old cars, bring life back into these cars. So all these things happen because it's basically just not passion that was driving me, but my family who also sort of helped me in furthering my passion. So these things sort of prompted me and got me to where I am today.
But do you actually run these cars every day? Because if you keep them in garages and not actually run, they tend to stall very, very often. How do you actually do that?
We do run few cars, not all the cars, but we do run, start most of the cars, in a year. But there are few regular cars which are run regularly. And fortunately today we have a a good team of mechanics and thinkers, painters, upholstery people. And my big daughter Rupali is now taken over maintaining all these things. And she also sort of sends these cars on occasions like weddings and movie shootings and ad shootings and things like that. So she looks after. So hence these cars are all run on a regular basis and they are kept, very well. So they are pretty trustworthy. In fact, we have also done a lot of long distance driving in our cars.
In these cars?
Yeah, in these cars.
Okay.
We have driven in India close to 2,000 kilometers at a stretch. And we have driven our cars overseas in France and in England, all over, for a long distance. And they're kept well. I mean, it's just that you need to give them that little TLC and then they're always up and running.
So for my viewers, TLC is tender loving care. Is that?
Tender loving care, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So I think what we need to also look at is this passion of restoring these vintage cars. They always say, as you grow old, you become more graceful, the graying is good, etc. And so also with this vintage, and so also with the wine. But when you look at the old structures like houses or any other monuments or etc., you've always taken that passion from cars to these kind of structures as well, and you also have an eye for detail, looking into switches or looking into those kind of period where you actually have like the switches, for example, or even the furniture, and you want to make sure that even the windows, the blends and things like this, and you will wait till you get the right blend and put it over there. And that is the beauty of it, when you restore it and not make it modern and you keep it the same era, 111 years. Can you just tell me about your Kunur property?
It's basically all these things are passion driven. You just need to be interested in something. When you start getting interested in something, you start putting in your mind into how it should be, how it need to look, and then you start referring couple of books and videos and movies and things like that. When you do all these things, then you get the aura or the feeling of how it should be. Then you start searching and trying to find out what are the right things, what are the things that would blend into that era. I'm basically, my family do call me that I'm a hoarder. I keep picking up all kinds of things and putting things together, but I enjoy it. I like to bring the old touch and old heritage back into life, and I like the historic things to be maintained, well kept, as they were kept, as pristine they were. And because modern things you can keep seeing, but if you go back into old things, even probably tomorrow our next generation or generation after that, when they come in, they say, oh, this is such a huge switch, this is made of so much of brass and it's so hard to put it on, because now these days the switches are all so light and you can do it on either even a feather touch or just just a touch, it comes on. But these switches you really have to sort of yank it out. But these are all the things which probably in the generations to come they would all miss it, and I would like to get these things done, treasure it, and put these things in order so that the younger generation, the newer generations would know what the history of all these things were. What was our the forefathers and grandfathers, what they all lived and how they all lived and how things have evolved over a period of time. So I think that is very important to teach them what is the evolution, what is the mankind, how he has evolved over a period of time, how things have evolved and how things have been today. And there are so many things which are so nice and delicate even yesteryears, and the way the things were made. In fact, not only the house, anything that I see, I like things to go back in old times because that gives a lot more feel, lot more history, and it is so much more nicer to see.
And I don't think, you should be called a hoarder. I would think you should be called a collector. And a collector or a connoisseur, and that would be the right word. Because I remember, going in the car with you and with my family and your family, and suddenly on that Mysore road, you just suddenly stopped near the forest area. And then you said, here is this coffee plant. And I was wondering, what is this piece of bark of a tree? I said, no, this is a very good coffee plant. We can actually paint it and we can actually use it as a decorative piece, or we can make a table out of it. And then I suddenly started imagining, yeah, you can make a table. So, you need that third eye to open to see what you can make it of. A person like me would just look at it and say, okay, it's only a twig or it's just a branch, and what are you going to do about it? But you stop the car, and the whole thing was full, and you still made space for it, and you put it in. He says, you'll never know, it looks so good. And that you took to your house, and then you got it made into a table, which is very good. So you had an eye for detail. You said, okay, fine, I've got to look at this and this, but I'm also going to enjoy nature. So you also had that passion for wildlife, for nature. You also had a passion for collection, but at the same time, you shifted your thoughts towards safety, and you created that Rushi safety devices. Now, what made you get into that, and what have you done?
In medicine, for a couple of years, I was in cardiothoracic surgery, and then I moved from surgery into hospital administration, and I managed part of the departments, and I started new wings in St. John's with healthcare services and things like that. But then my wife's side, there are a couple of her cousins who are all in the army as 3-star generals, and a couple of my friends who are also there. They said, you have a huge contact with the political circle, and why don't we put these things together and set up a company? So I set up this company in 2003, Rushi. Rushi is R-U-S-H-E, which is actually Rupali and Shefali. So, and we basically into safety and security equipments. We were into infrastructure, and we were also into vintage, the tires and parts and things like that. And safety and security did very well. We did, in fact, we even blast-proofed Prime Minister's house. We did some work in the Parliament, but we did a lot of work in the forward areas, in Udhampur. Bulletproofing and blast proofing all the buses. In fact, there was general who was looking after, and there was a brigadier, and brigadier was always little looking at me. He says he's a doctor by profession. What can he do for the army? Because they had so many other technical people. But we had tied up with a company called Wintech, which is run by Mr. Paul Brogan. And Paul Brogan was a friend of Dick Cheney, who was the vice president of the US then. And Paul Brogan and Dick Cheney were partners in this company, and I took dealership of that. And then I also had a dealership of AS&E from Boston, which made real-time scanners, which we also used in some of the airports. And we also used from Srinagar to Jammu. So real time, a truck would pass through, and we would know exactly what the truck was carrying. It would look as if though they were carrying apples, but inside it was all arms and ammunition and people. So we could do all that real time, and we were able to, combat and put these things in order. In fact, when all these things started happening, the generals and the brigadiers and major generals, everybody were very happy. But the biggest thing that happened in my life, and which is a very turning point, I remember once I did up a bus. Usually the buses, when you do armoring of a bus, it is almost about 4 tons. A small bus which carries 40 people, it's about 4 to 5 tons is the normal weight. But our solution with Wintech and the other products that we used, it hardly weighed about 1.5 tons, and we had a slap-on armors, and we had strengthened all the glasses, and we were running. And then on that particular day, I was flying to Gangtok, and then the Lieutenant General called me up and said, "Hey Doc, where are you?" I said, "No, I'm landed in Gangtok. Take a next flight and come back to Srinagar." I said, No. I mean, there are no flights. I can come to Delhi." He said, "No, you come to Delhi. There'll be an army aircraft, and it'll bring you to Srinagar." I said, "What is the hurry?" I said, "You just come, chap." And then I got in, and then I landed there. I had all the army people waiting there at the airport, and then they escorted me to the Badami Bagh. That's where the army center is. And then there was a big gathering there in the conference room, and there was TV and all the Jawans and everybody. So I went there. I was just wondering what happened. He says, "No, this morning there was a bus which was coming, and there was an RDX explosive on the side of the road, which was about 20 kilos, which went off. And except one shrapnel which went into the driver's arm, all the others are all safe, which we never had in the history of army. So you are a doctor who would be saving patients, but today you have saved our Jawans." And they felicitated me, and they were interviewing, some of the Jawans and their families. And the ladies said that, "We are so happy our husbands are alive and without any injuries." That was a very touching moment in my life. That was way back in 2004, 2005. It was very touching. I felt that I moved out of medicine, but it made me feel proud. On that moment when I was felicitated, and all the Jawans later met me and said, "Thank you, sir. We are all alive because of you." And the brigadier, who was always sort of, used to turn his face around, he came and said, "Sorry, Doc. I had never thought that what you did. I mean, this was a real experience that happened." And then we are all, all my boys are, happy and hale and hearty. I think that's the biggest thing that you could do. So it's all a moment that what we have done. We also did a little bit of fencing in the glaciers. We had quite a few kilometers to do, but there's another friend, I had to sort of hand over part of it to him, and we did about 5 kilometers of fencing in the glaciers. And that was also an experience. Other than that, bulletproofing, blast-proofing all the vehicles of the forward areas, and Prime Minister's house and all, which are all few things which we have done. Other than that, we were doing regularly bulletproofing of all the Z category, security, VVIPs vehicles, which my sister concern still does it. So we are a little bit involved with the security today, not as much as we did in the early 2000s.
Why did you give it up?
No, because it needed a lot more licensing, and then I did have quite a few generals with me, working with me. They were all very helpful, but the leg work and spade work that was to be done was quite a bit, and then it was tiring. And I remember one year the Sahara came out with a new scheme saying that a platinum member, so you pay about 5 lakhs, one time, and you can fly any amount of flights. So I did that for 3 years, and I remember one year I flew 998 flights, 2 flights short of 1,000 flights. Every Monday morning I used to take a flight from Bangalore to Delhi, and then I used to fly Delhi to Srinagar, and the Tuesday Srinagar to Delhi, and Delhi to all the other places. And then I used to be flying every day. I was sort of stationed in Delhi, and finally come back on a Friday night to be with my wife and my babies in Bangalore. And again, Monday early morning, I used to be on a flight. And weekly, I used to do at least about, 10 to 12, 15 flights, I used to be always in the air. So, and then for me, I just wanted to achieve something. I did it, and then I was happy with it. And then later the bureaucracy and the things like that were getting a little too difficult, and I didn't want to get too much into all that. And so I sort of,
But the thrill of taking the challenges and to be able to achieve that, don't you think that in itself was good enough?
It was nice. It was nice. I'll tell you, I don't regret anything that I've done in my life. I did my medicine, I did my management, and I went into safety and security, and whether I went into serious farming. Fortunately, my serious farming is now been trickled off into my wife, and she's very much into organic and serious farming. I don't do anything much except helping her here and there. But I'm happy at the end of the day that I'm not pursued one thing to the end, but then I have always taken up something and I've come to a level where I feel, okay, this is it, I've achieved, and then I've sort of moved on. So the only thing that is sort of still going on with me is this vintage and classic cars.
Yeah, that's something, where you look at this vintage and classic cars. You are actually the president of these historic cars and the green badge, label badge that you have. Can you explain something about that? You're the president there.
I think I should tell you a little bit about my vintage and classic cars. All this racing and rallying, and I knew that being a doctor, I could not continue on this because once, our dean and also our professor, Dr. Jerry Mascarenhas, he caught me one day. I was in cardiothoracic surgery, and he says, he said, Ravi, did you do your rounds on Sunday? I said, yes, sir. Then he asked all the nuns and nurses, was Ravi there doing his rounds? And they all said, yes, he was there, sir, and he did this, he did that. And then finally, he looked at all the nuns and the nurses and said, what is he giving you all for to lie? He said, no, sir, he was there yesterday morning. So then he pulled out one newspaper from his jacket, and he said, here is a picture. He's receiving a trophy in Chennai yesterday after winning the races. And you say that he was here yesterday morning. So then, they all covered up. And then Jerry also finally laughed it up. But then that's how my thing is. I knew that I can't continue with racing and rallying. And it so happened I had advanced for a car in Bangalore. And then when I went for these races in Sholavaram, I saw a beautiful car pass by. And then I asked my friend, I said, a very nice car. He says, yeah, the car is up for sale. It's in today's papers. So we went and picked up a paper. Then I saw it belonged to General Mahadevan. So I went to his house. He used to live in Red Hills. I went to his house and I looked at him. I said, sir, very nice guy. He said, hey, come up, man. He was about 6 foot 3 inches tall. And he was retired from army, and he was heading the Northern Command. And he said, come up and, let's have a beer and let's eat something. So this was in the afternoon, about 11:30, 12. So I kept drinking with him. I did not drink as much he drank. But if he would have a bottle, I would probably have a glass. But then it went on for about, a couple of hours. And then finally, I asked him, sir, what is the price of the car? He said, no, this car belongs to Lord Mountbatten, and I got it from him, and this is the only car, and then I would like to have 40,000. 40,000 was a huge money then. And because I could get cars for 10, 15,000. And there was no way that I could, pull out 40,000 in way back in 79, 80, when I was still a student, yeah. So I told him, sir, thank you, sir, and all, and then he walked down to see me off. So I said bye, and then I left. And I had my father's car. I had taken my father's car to Sholavaram to see the races. Then in the evening, I said, let me give him a call and thank him and his wife for being so kind and hospitable. So I called up his house. His wife picked up. He says, no, General had one too many beers to drink. When he was climbing the stairs, he slipped. He has broken his leg. He is in the command hospital. So I'm just taking, food for him. He is very fussy. He needs food to be taken 3 times a day. And I'm just taking his dinner now. So I went to command hospital. I met him and I apologized. I said, sir, I'm so sorry. He said, no. I had a good afternoon and I enjoyed my afternoon. Then that guilt in me was sort of brewing, saying that, it's all happened because of me. Then I requested my father. I said, Dad, can I just leave your car for a few days? This is what has happened. He said, okay, son, I don't require the car because I can use the government vehicle and you can leave the car. Then I requested my friend, could you organize a driver so that the driver can take General's wife to the Red Hills and hospital, they can do that little, service, and then, for her to bring in food morning, afternoon, evening. So I left the car and then came back. And after about 10 days, I got a trunk call saying that the general is back home. You can take the car. So I asked my friend to send the car back to Bangalore. This happened in February '79.
Wow.
And in November, end of November '79, I got a telegram, General passed away. So I could not go for his last rites, but I went for the 11-day ceremony, which was early December. So I went, I paid my condolences, and I came back. The worst part of time in my life was I got a letter by General's wife. I do remember her name, Kamala, and Mrs. Kamala Mahadevan. And she wrote to me, she said, please come and collect your car. And that was a tough time, because if I have to collect, I have to pay 40,000. And 40,000 was not in my purview. And I went literally begging all my friends. I had savings of about 12,000, 13,000.